China is hacking the internet to interfere with UK politics, says the front page lead story in the London Times today. And meanwhile, in New Zealand, a very similar story is it's springing up in the press there. And in the recent past, there have been reports about China doing similar things in the US and in Canada and in Australia. What's all this about? I can tell you. None of the stories are true. I'll tell you what's really happening. All these tales come from a group known as the Five Eyes, an international club of spies dominated by the United States. Now, these people, their actual job descriptions specify that they must create disinformation about their enemies. That's literally what they're paid to do. It's not a secret. When members retire, they write entire books about the clever ways they did it. Now, one specific strategy they have run since a series of meetings in 2018 was for the intelligence services to get politicians and media to inform the world that China has hacked into US systems and was interfering in democracy there. In 2020, the politicians and media did exactly what they'd been told to do. And a huge number of reports, they said that China was interfering in US elections. And this is the really important bit. They said that they'd seen the intelligence reports from the spy community confirming this. They said they'd read them, right? Now, these tales were all over the international media. Here are some examples.
I believe it's China, because I've seen the intelligence. That's what I've concluded.
When it comes to elections and what the intelligence community has made very clear is that first you have China, which has the most massive program to influence the United States politically. Well, look, we know it's China.
Now, between 2020 and 2021, there was an election in the US which caused some changes of policy and changes of staff. And this led to the actual publication of those specific intelligence reports. What did they say? They said that China was not interfering in US elections. Let me repeat that. The actual investigation had concluded that China was not interfering in US elections. Politicians have been obediently delivering a false message through the media that the evidence said China was hacking the democratic process, while having in their possession the documents saying that this was the opposite of the truth. They weren't. So it was time to run a correction, right? Set the record straight, right? Follow the principles of ethical journalism, right? I only saw one news media outlet actually do that, and that was a news commentary show featuring a woman named Rachel Maddow. Here she is.
China's using a massive and sophisticated influence campaign that dwarfs anything that any other country is doing.
None of that is true. None of that was true when they said it, and they knew it.
Now here's where the story gets really interesting. The exact same fake news story, the Chinese are using technology to interfere in our elections, was later pumped out in Canada, then in Australia. And this week it's being pumped out in the UK and in New Zealand. Are these true? Well, let's discuss that. Let's use a little tool that some of us have called critical thinking. Now here's China. It makes up almost a fifth of humanity. That's a lot of people. The Chinese leadership has a massive job governing its country. Do the Chinese have any interest in interfering with the elections in the UK, which is less than 1% of humanity? Or New Zealand, which is 0.06% of the world's population? Of course not. It's absurd. Xi Jinping doesn't have the slightest interest in who is elected in the Wellington suburbs in the next election. Why would he? It's another thing. The critical thinker, which is a breed that unfortunately seems to have died out in the Western media, would say, look, in most Western countries, both parties are rather xenophobic. It would be entirely pointless to swing elections one way or another. And here's another thing. If China had any interest in interfering in the politics of its neighbours, it would be India, which is also almost 1/5 of humanity, or Indonesia, the most populous country in Southeast Asia. But not UK or New Zealand. Sorry. Not interested. Too small. Now let's look at the list of places in which intelligence agents have tried to print that China is hacking their electoral systems. Number 1, the United States. Number 2, Canada. Number 3, Australia. Number 4, the UK. Number 5, New Zealand. Oh look, it's the 5 members of the Five Eyes group. What a coincidence. Well, what are the odds of that? Guys, you're not fooling anybody. Wait. You're fooling politicians and media in those countries. But they're being fooled because they want to be fooled. But the rest of the world, we're not fooled. Critical thinking, it's what the world needs now. Peace.